Ever wondered how Halloween came to be? Our tale begins over 2,000 years ago, in the verdant landscapes of ancient Ireland, Scotland, and the Isle of Man, where the ancient Celts celebrated a festival known as Samhain. Pronounced Samhain, this day marked a significant transition. It was the end of the bountiful summer and the harvest, and the onset of the dark, cold winter, a time often associated with human death. The Celts believed that on the eve of Samhain, the boundary between the living and the dead blurred. The ghosts of the dead were believed to return to Earth, causing trouble and damaging crops. But it wasn't all gloom and doom. The Celts also saw Samhain as a time for communing with the deceased, a chance to gain guidance for the future, a prophecy from the other side, if you will. To celebrate Samhain, the Celts would light massive bonfires, where people gathered to burn crops and animal sacrifices to the Celtic deities. The fires also served a dual purpose. They were a beacon in the darkening days of autumn, and they were also thought to ward off any malevolent spirits that may have slipped through the veil. But what about the costumes? Well, to outwit these wandering spirits, the Celts would don costumes typically consisting of animal heads and skins. This was done in an attempt to blend in with the supernatural visitors, to trick the spirits into thinking they were one of them. Over time, Samhain evolved and merged with other traditions, but at its core, it was a festival of fire, a time to honor the dead and a time to prepare for the coming winter, a time of endings but also beginnings, a time of fear but also celebration. This ancient festival, with its blend of fear, reverence, and celebration of the supernatural, is the root from which Halloween sprung. So the next time you put on your Halloween costume, remember its ancient origins. But how did a pagan festival become a Christian holiday, you may ask? Well, let's delve into the intriguing transformation. As Christianity spread throughout Europe in the first millennium, it sought to incorporate, rather than eradicate, existing pagan traditions. In the 7th century, Pope Boniface IV designated November 1st as All Saints' Day, a day to honor saints and martyrs. This strategic move aimed to replace the pagan festival of Samhain with a church-sanctioned holiday. The day before All Saints' Day, October 31st, was known as All Hallows' Eve, hallows being an Old English term for saints. This was a time when the living could honor the saints before celebrating the souls of the departed on All Souls' Day, November 2nd. Over time, All Hallows' Eve began to adopt some of the traditions from Samhain. The belief that spirits could walk the earth on this night persisted. As a result, people continued to don costumes and light bonfires to ward off these spirits. The church couldn't entirely erase the pagan influences, and so they became a part of the Christian celebration. In the Middle Ages, a custom called souling emerged on All Hallows' Eve. Children and the poor would go door to door, offering prayers for the dead in exchange for soul cakes. This practice, some believe, is the origin of our modern trick-or-treating. The name Halloween itself didn't come into use until much later. It's a contraction of All Hallows' Eve, and it first appeared in the 16th century. The holiday continued to evolve, incorporating elements from both its pagan and Christian roots. So we see that the transition from a pagan festival to a Christian holiday wasn't a simple one. It was a process of integration and adaptation, a melding of beliefs and traditions that spanned centuries. It was a dance between the old and the new, the sacred and the supernatural. Thus, the ancient festival of Samhain slowly transformed into a Christian holiday. And that is how Halloween, as we know it today, began to take shape. How did Halloween make its way to America, you ask? Well, let's travel back in time to the era of colonial America. Now, picture this. It's the 17th century, a time when America was a melting pot of cultures and traditions. Yet Halloween as we know it was almost non-existent. Why, you may wonder? The answer lies in the rigid Protestant belief systems prevalent in colonial New England. In this time and place, anything that deviated from their strict religious practices was viewed with suspicion, and Halloween, with its pagan roots, was no exception. The Puritans, who were the dominant religious group, held a firm grip on societal norms and celebrations. They frowned upon Halloween's ancient customs, considering them to be frivolous, if not outright sacrilegious. However, as we move away from New England into the southern colonies, we see a different picture. Here, the celebration of harvest festivals was common, and these celebrations bore a resemblance to the Halloween traditions we're familiar with today. There were community gatherings, dances, singing, storytelling, and yes, even the telling of ghost stories. But the real transformation of Halloween in America began with the influx of diverse European ethnic groups. Each of these cultures brought with them their unique customs and beliefs. The Irish and Scottish immigrants, for instance, introduced the tradition of going door to door in costume, a practice known as guising. Now let's add another layer to this cultural mosaic: the influence of the American Indians. Their beliefs in spirits and the supernatural resonated with the European traditions, further enriching the evolving Halloween customs. Over time, these diverse influences began to mesh together, gradually forming a distinctly American version of Halloween. It was not the Halloween we know today with its trick-or-treating and jack-o'-lanterns, but it was a start. It was a celebration that was becoming less about ancient superstitions and more about community and camaraderie. Halloween was now ready to become a uniquely American tradition. Halloween in the 19th century took a more familiar form. As the century turned, this ancient tradition began to shed its religious undertones and morph into a more community-centered celebration. It was a period of transformation, a metamorphosis that saw Halloween evolve into the fun-filled, costume-laden festival we recognize today. In the early part of the 19th century, communities across Europe and North America began to place a greater emphasis on social gatherings. Halloween provided the perfect backdrop for these communal celebrations. The once somber occasion began to take on a more jovial tone, with parties becoming the centerpiece of the Halloween festivities. At these gatherings, games were played, stories were shared, and laughter filled the air. The focus shifted from placating wandering spirits to indulging in the merriment of the season. The games played during these parties often revolved around future-telling, a nod to Halloween's origins as a time when the veil between the living and the dead was believed to be at its thinnest. Food, as with any celebration, played a pivotal role. Seasonal treats like apples, nuts, and cakes were shared among partygoers. These foods not only brought a sense of warmth and community, but also carried symbolic meanings. Apples, for instance, were often used in divination games, their shapes and positions interpreted as signs of future events. Then came the costumes. Festive attire became a staple of these Halloween parties, with people dressing up in an array of outfits. These costumes, while fun and entertaining, also served a purpose. They were a way for individuals to step out of their everyday roles and immerse themselves in the spirit of the season. As Halloween moved away from its religious roots, it became a more secular event, a community-based celebration that brought people together. It was a time for socializing, for enjoying the company of others, and for reveling in the joy of the season. This period laid the foundation for the Halloween festivities we know today. So, what's Halloween like today, I hear you ask? Well, let me tell you, it's a far cry from its ancient roots, and yet, some traditions have endured throughout the centuries. When one thinks of Halloween today, the first image that likely comes to mind is a sea of children dressed in an array of imaginative costumes, knocking on doors with an expectant chant of trick or treat. This tradition, rooted in medieval practices of souling and guising, has evolved into a beloved ritual where children and sometimes adults solicit candy from their neighbors. Carving jack-o'-lanterns is another Halloween tradition that has stood the test of time. What started as a means to ward off evil spirits with turnips by the Celts has now become a fun pastime involving carving faces into pumpkins and lighting them from within. Halloween today also serves as a reason for festive gatherings. From spooky house parties to community events, the holiday encourages people to come together and celebrate. It's a day where the ordinary rules of life are suspended and everyone can be whoever or whatever they want to be. Of course, it's not all age-old traditions. Halloween has also become a highly commercialized holiday. From costumes and candy to decorations and party supplies, the holiday has been transformed into a billion-dollar industry. In fact, according to the National Retail Federation, Americans are expected to spend over $8 billion on Halloween in 2023 alone. Eating treats, another cornerstone of the holiday, has also taken on a commercial aspect. Gone are the days of homemade candied apples and popcorn balls. Today, store-bought candy reigns supreme, with millions of pounds of sweets being consumed each Halloween. So there you have it. Halloween today is a vibrant blend of old and new, a day of celebration and indulgence, shrouded in a veil of fun and fright. From ancient rituals to a billion-dollar industry, Halloween has indeed come a long way.